Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to impart techies. First of all, I would really apologize for the delay in the starting of the webinar due to a technical issue. We were not able to start on time. I'm really sorry for that. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is CMMI and Agile, a perspective. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Srinivasan Venkataraman, Assistant Vice President at Polaris Financial Technology Limited. Mr. Srinivasan Venkataraman is currently working as AVP at Polaris Financial Technology Limited. He is a certified project management professional and an IT professional with more than 15 years of experience in diverse domains and managing projects, project teams, and worldwide clientele. He is well versed in quality processes associated with the SDLC and CMMI processes. He has experience in executing projects using Agile Methodology. He has been training teams on CMMI, project management, and Agile development practices. Mr. Sri has domain exposure in banking, insurance, and telecom domains and has delivered projects for many Fortune 500 companies. He has extensive experience in Java, J2EE technologies, and BPM tools. He has also taken up many roles in technical areas and currently involved in managing delivering projects and programs for different clients. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Mr. Srinivasan.
Mohni, are you able to hear me? Hello?
We can hear you. We can hear you very well, Mr. Sri. You can start.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Mohni, for that introduction. Hi, very good evening to all of you. And my sincere apologies that we are starting a little late due to a technical glitch. And we'll get started. For the next 50 minutes to 60 minutes, I'll be talking on CMMI and Agile from a software development perspective. And the agenda for today is we'll be going through what is CMMI all about, what are the different representations, what are the disciplines available, what are the different maturity levels, and we'll be going through what is Agile all about, what are the different methodologies, what are the benefits of Agile, what are the myths surrounding Agile, and then we'll try to map some of the, most of the process areas with some of the Agile practices which are being followed right now, and ultimately we'll see how the process areas map to the Agile concepts and practices. Okay, so before we get into CMI, typically, what is we'll first see what is a process. A process we can define as a set of interrelated activities which transform inputs and then generate outputs, and with a given purpose. Probably it might take some help of some tools, methods, or materials, or even people. So what do you typically, what are the typical characteristics of a process? Probably you can say that a process would be documented, it should be simple, it should be measurable, it should be flexible, and it should be stable, and probably it should have some clearly defined gates. That is, what should be the input criteria and what is the exit criteria. Okay, so why are we giving a lot of emphasis on process? Because the I mean, generally there is a premise that the quality of a product or a solution is largely determined by the quality of the process that is used to develop and maintain it. Okay, so I mean, it goes without saying that process is definitely important. So based on this probably emphasis, CMMI has been developed, and if you look at the origins of CMMI, it was started or initiated by the Department of Defense at US with the help of Carnegie Mellon University, and they developed this model. So what is CMMI all about? CMMI is nothing but a collection of characteristics of effective processes that provides guidance for improving an organization's process so that the organization can be in a mature state so that it is easier for it to develop products or solutions and also to provide services. And CMI is actually a model, and it shows us what to do and not how to do it. Basically, there are some examples which are given as part of CMI documentation, but it really focuses on what to do and not what is the method in which you do it. So it goes without saying that it has to be applied rather than it's not an implementation methodology or a practice. So it is rather a set of concepts that we'll have to apply in an organization to probably mature from a process perspective. Looking at the different disciplines of CMMI, there are three different disciplines. One is on development. When I say development, it focuses on how do you build stuff, probably how do you build or develop or create stuff, and all the processes are related to that. The second discipline is on acquisition, so that handles with how do you buy stuff, or how do you probably have contracts with different providers or customers. And the third discipline is on services. How do you provide services? And probably it could be intangible, and basically based on service requests, how do you provide services both internally as well as to your external customers. Moving on to different structures or different representations of CMMI, there are two different representations. One is the stage representation, and in a stage representation is a proven sequence of improvements which has been established, which serve as a foundation for each level, which serves as a foundation for the next. Okay, so I mean, there have been certain set of process areas which we'll be looking into, which have been grouped and probably determined as a predefined set, probably which will enable the organization to move ahead in terms of its maturity level. The other representation is the continuous representation. It allows the organization to select the order of improvement that best meets the organization's business objectives, and also to mitigate any of organization's areas of risk. So probably from a stage representation, it answers a question: what is a good order for approaching improvement across the organization? So it is actually a development or a process improvement across the organization. In terms of the continuous representation, probably it answers the question: what is a good order for approaching improvement of a particular process area? So specific areas, probably if the organization decides to improve on it, so probably they can make use of the continuous representation. What are the different maturity levels? Okay, so as I said, in terms of a stage representation, we have different maturity levels. So typically we have 5 maturity levels. So the first one is the initial level, that is where the basic level, where the processes are unpredictable, not controlled, and everything happens in a very haphazard manner. The next level, the second level, is the managed level, where process are characterized by projects and they are reactive. So actually each project follows its own process. It's not clearly defined across the organization. The third maturity level is the defined level, where the process are characterized across the organization, and it's more of a proactive mode. And the fourth maturity level is where the process measured and are controlled. The fifth maturity level is on the optimizing level, where the focus is on continuous improvement, where it's an optimized state where greater emphasis on process improvement. Similarly, we have something similar to the maturity levels called the capability levels. I mean, in a similar manner, we have 4 different levels: performed, managed, and defined. And the capability levels are applicable for a continuous representation, whereas the maturity levels are focusing on the stage representation. We'll be more focusing on the stage representation and its maturity levels in this presentation. And what is a process area? See, typically all these CMMI constitutes of different process areas. So process area is not a process description or a definition. It's actually a collection of related practices in an area when performed collectively satisfy the goals related to that particular area. So there are different process areas like probably project planning, requirements management, requirements development. So all these different process areas are common to both the staged as well as the continuous representations. As you can see, the process area comprises of specific goals and specific practices as well as generic goals and generic practices. So a specific goals, it's more relevant or applicable to a specific process area which will cater to the unique characteristics that has to be satisfied for that particular process area. For example, if you look at a DAR, decision analysis and resolution process area, so there is a specific goal called evaluate alternatives. Similarly, if you look at requirements development process area, we have a specific goal called elicit requirements, and from a project planning perspective, you have a specific goal for establishing estimates and how do you do a project planning and things like that. So as you can see, practices are major building blocks in establishing the process maturity of an organization. So specific goals and specific practices are applicable for each of the process areas. Similarly, we have something called as generic goals and generic practices. Generic goals, as the name suggests, they are generic in nature. When I say generic, it's common across process areas, and some of the practices are similar. That is, can be made applicable to different process areas. See, for example, if you look at the generic goal 2, you have some generic practices like establishing training. So from an organization perspective, if you look at the requirements development perspective, training could indicate training people on how do you elicit requirements. From a configuration management perspective, it could mean how do you train people on configuration management perspective and things like that. So we'll be closely looking at the different process areas available in the development discipline, CMMI development discipline, and you can see that there are around 22 process areas which are available, and for CMMI services and acquisition, there are services we have 24 process areas, and acquisition, it's similar to development, it has 22 process areas. As I mentioned, we'll be focusing more on the development process areas in this presentation. So based on the different maturity levels, we can segregate the process areas. So at level 2 we have 7 process areas. At level 3 we have 11 process areas, and 2 for each process area. Maturity level at 4 and 5. So we'll be focusing on these in the later slides of this presentation. So coming back to what is Agile and what is Agile all about. So if you take a typical dictionary and then try to understand what agile means in general terminology. It means that something marked by an ability to think quickly, or a state where you are mentally acute or aware of things. Okay, so it is nothing but an ability to adapt to changing circumstances or changing requirements. So from a software development perspective, what does agility mean? So probably we can say that it's an ability to respond to change. The change could be due to different factors, due to customer, due to stakeholders, due to requirements, due to uh, regulations. It could be anything. So agility, if you look at agility, it is more of the nature of the organization or a project to welcome or respond to change. So from agile delivery perspective, it's nothing about creating quality products or solutions by giving the highest business value to the customer. Okay, so there are a number of techniques which probably are being used in agile, like business value prioritization, where the business team is involved in prioritizing the requirements, short iterative cycles, and all the entire project is divided into short iterations or sprints. Early and automated testing, uh, self-governing teams, stakeholders involvement throughout the project, and eliminating waste, and continuously improving the way in which the project teams work. So moving back a little, uh, probably prior to some 20 years or so, agile practices have been followed since 1950s, but the real agile movement, probably we can call it, it started around 2001 when some of the prominent agile proponents met, and then they drafted the Agile Manifesto. As you can see, there are certain things which are valued more over the normal processes which have been conventionally followed in the normal waterfall life cycle. So individuals and interactions are given more importance than process and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And again, you can see that responding to change is one of the items in the manifesto. So where the changing requirements are change generally is welcomed by the agile teams. As part of the agile meeting manifesto, when the manifesto was drafted, the agile proponents also came up with around 12 practices or principles of agile software, which I have highlighted here in the slide. So probably I'll just quickly run through some of the important points which I've highlighted. Satisfy the customer, delivery of a valuable software. So the first important objective is to how do you satisfy the customer in terms of delivering the valuable software. Welcoming changing requirements. As I said, agile teams are adaptable to change, and they welcome change rather. Deliver working software frequently. So the main objective is to deliver working software frequently, probably in terms of few weeks or a few months. Business people and developers must work together. So it's against the convention where business people are involved only in the initial stages and during the user acceptance testing. So they are part of the team. Motivated individuals and trust them to get the job done. So we're talking about a agile team where team members are motivated themselves and they trust each other. Face-to-face conversation is given more importance, so for facilitating effective communication. Working software is a primary measure of progress. So all progress is determined only in terms of working software. Sustainable development. We are talking about sustainable development where we are able to sustain the pace in which we do the development. Technical excellence and good design. So needless to say, technical excellence is given more priority and good design principles. Simplicity, art of maximizing the work not done. So basically, simplicity refers to, ensuring that we do tasks or activities which are only relevant to what is needed for the project, or the project goals. Self-organizing teams, we are talking about teams which are mature enough, which are self-organizing or which are self-directed. So we don't have a autocratic way of working where all directions are given by the project manager or any manager for that matter. Tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So whenever there are changes or whenever there are improvements which are identified by the team, so the team members adjust their working based on that and adjust their behavior accordingly. So these are all important principles of Agile which were formulated. Some of the Agile practices I have mentioned. In the interest of time, I'll be moving ahead since most of these practices will be covering in the later slides. So if you look at Agile methodologies, so as I mentioned, if you look at some of the practices, they are as old as in the 1950s, and slowly different people have formulated different methodologies over the due course of time. And so we have different methodologies like Scrum, pragmatic programming, Lean, Kanban, XP, feature-driven development, and so on. But since the latest research shows that predominantly of all the Agile implementations, the Scrum methodology and extreme programming have been the most, the highest usage is across these two methodologies. So we'll be more focusing on these two for this presentation. So Scrum, again, this is one of the most popular methodologies which is being used by different organizations right now. And probably if you can see, there are different practices like product backlog, effort estimation, sprint planning meeting, and things like that. So probably I'll just try to, at a high level, I'll try to explain how the Scrum cycle works. So effectively, we have something called as the product backlog, which is nothing but the list of all the requirements which are needed to be developed for a particular project. So as you can see that there are many items in this diagram. So as part of the release planning meeting, so we identify what are the product backlog items, and based on the different priorities, business priorities, and based on the status of the requirements that are available. So the product owners gives all the priority items which have to be developed, and these items are taken up as part of the sprint backlog. So product backlog is a superset, and sprint backlog is a number of items that are planned to be developed for a particular sprint. Again, so in Scrum terminology, each iteration is called a sprint. So each sprint lasts for around 2 to 4 weeks, and as part of the each sprint cycle, we have something called as a daily stand-up meeting or daily Scrum meeting, wherein the team members meet on a daily basis. And how it works is that they meet for around 15 minutes, not more than that, and predominantly three items are discussed. One is on what had the individual done since the last stand-up meeting, that is probably from yesterday till today, what the particular individual will be doing from this meeting till the next meeting, and what are the roadblocks or issues that the particular individual is having. So these are the three predominant things that are covered as part of the daily Scrum meeting. So as part of this daily Scrum meeting, so these things are discussed along with the product owner, so that the product owner is also aware of the status of the the product owner. Probably he represents the business, probably in a software development organization. You can typically correlate him to be a business analyst, or he represents the business end user, or he could be the customer himself who is taking care of the requirements. Sprint review meeting. So at the end of each sprint, we have something called as a sprint review meeting. So which is nothing but a review meeting with the customer or the product owner, where the developed software is given a demo to ensure that the product owner is satisfied on what has been developed, and probably if everything goes on fine, it is moved into production. So wherever there are any inputs needed, so probably the team will might probably undertake to do it immediately if it is possible, or probably there are improvements probably that could be taken up in the next sprint. And at the end of each sprint, we have something called as retrospectives. So retrospectives are nothing but a meeting with all the Scrum team members along with the Scrum Master and the product owner, where uh, the status of the sprint. Two main things are discussed, namely what are the things that went well in the particular sprint. That is, what are the things which have been done in a good manner, which probably the team members would like to, agile team members would like to probably continue doing. What are the things that, what are the issues that have been done, so probably which they want to avoid, and certain areas, what are the things which probably they can improve upon. So these items are discussed, and specific action owners are identified who will be responsible for carrying out these improvement activities in the subsequent sprints. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a continuous improvement process where the team members evolve, they develop or improve on all the processes that are followed, any specific practices that are followed. So it's a regular continuous exercise. And if you can see that slide, I have also added another diagram which actually is typically the Scrum team uses this task board, and basically it covers all the items that have to be done across a particular sprint. So we have three different items. What are the items to be performed, which comes under not checked out, and what are the items which are in progress, which will come under the column checked out, and done items, which are basically items or activities that have been completed by the agile team. Towards the right, you have the burn down chart. A burn down chart is nothing but a mechanism in which the team members or the management can have a look at the progress of the sprint. So basically, it's nothing but a graph containing what are the story points that are yet to be developed on the y-axis and the each day of the sprint. So probably we'll be plotting a graph with these two inputs, and then so as we progress across the sprint, so the amount of work pending should be come down. So typically a good progress sprint is where you have something like a right angle triangle as shown here. So that's all about Scrum in a nutshell. And moving across extreme programming. Extreme programming is also one of the methodologies which is probably which is in use prominently, and some of the practices that extreme programming talks about 12 core principles, and one is on the planning game. It's basically the involvement of the team members in terms of planning and estimation. Short releases, again these are similar to sprints which span across 1 to 3 weeks. Design metaphors, where we use metaphors for the understanding of the entire team, and talks about simple design, and we create a simple design and develop the code in an elaborate manner, and then probably if possible we re-engineering the code to get back the original design. Testing, and extreme programming lays emphasis on automated testing to a greater extent. Refactoring, again since we are talking about simple design, so designs evolve and they are revisited frequently. Pair programming, this is one of the important techniques, or probably a little controversial also, where two people are involved in developing a code whereby different perspectives are analyzed in terms of development, as well as it serves as a review mechanism also, which is happening parallel to the development. Collective code ownership, it talks about the entire team being the owner for the code that is developed. So here it is a situation where in terms of any fixes or any changes to the code, any person who is available in the team should be able to do any change any part of the code. Continuous integration. So since we are talking about coding discipline, so obviously it is very important to have a good continuous integration practice where code churned out is integrated with the main source code on a regular basis. It talks about nightly builds where code developed is checked into the version control system on a daily basis. 40-hour week. Again, so extreme programming gives more emphasis on the team being productive. So it gives emphasis on ensuring the team members are productive, and they can be productive only if they stick to their working conditions or timings. So strictly it enforces a 40-hour week. There could be deviations here and there, but not on a regular basis. Only in case of dire need, there could be some deviations in terms of working extra. On-site customer, as I mentioned earlier, customer is the person who has to sit along with the team, who is part of the entire team, and he ensures that team members understand the requirements right throughout the course of the project. Coding standards, again it gives a greater emphasis on coding standards. One, that it is easily maintainable by the entire team. As I mentioned earlier, any person should be able to do a change in the code at any point of time, and it ensures that there is a uniformity or consistency in terms of the code that is being developed. So that is predominantly on extreme programming. And so as I mentioned earlier, these two are extreme programming and Scrum methodology are two of the most important methodologies that are being used, or if not for the methodology, most of the practices used in Agile are taken from these two methodologies. How do you compare Agile with traditional methodologies in a waterfall model? So probably I've highlighted some of the differences where you can see that it is more of an adaptive nature, Agile methodology, using Agile methodology. Success is measured in terms of business value, in terms of prioritized requirements which are delivered. Management style is decentralized. As I mentioned, the teams are self-organized and self-directed. We welcome change in Agile. It's more of a collaborative approach. Again, documentation again flows down from the Agile Manifesto, where documentation only for the relevant or required parts documentation is available. And again, it's more on, we value people more rather than more on process, which is actually the case with the traditional methodology. And planning, again, it is minimal because we cater to the planning from a sprint perspective. Though we start with a release perspective, we are driven by the sprint perspective. Return on investment is again it's early because we are talking about delivered software at the end of each sprint. So probably within 2 or 4 weeks we are talking about deliverables to the end client or the end user. And we are talking about a team size which is small and creative and who are ready to perform continuous improvement as they grow along the course of the project. So there are because Agile, since it's probably a mixture of different methodologies, a lot of practices have been evolved, and organizations, they have taken different practices from different methodologies which I've discussed, and probably they have in most of the cases organizations have probably followed their own methodology for their own practices which are suitable from a Agile development perspective. So because of this, there are a lot of misunderstanding or myths surrounding Agile, because people are not really knowledgeable enough in terms of what are the different practices, what are the goals, or what is the objective behind Agile. So these are some of the myths. Probably, the traditional probably proponents think that it is lacking discipline. They do whatever they want. Quality of the product is not ensured. We don't know what is available, when deliveries will be made, and generally it is only for software geeks, and it's not for normal people. And again, the most important thing is Agile is easy. So I mean, which probably you'll get a sense of the complexity that is involved in Agile based on all these practices. And some of the challenges, again, so single most important challenges I would say that is that uh, Agile is a journey. It's not a silver bullet solution where one fine day you can say that I'll start implementing in Agile. It's a social change, it's a mindset change, and people are used to only the waterfall mindset. So it is a big change on from the team members perspective, those who are going to practice, as well as from the management perspective. Software organizations need to really find value in Agile. And simplicity requires extra work, and we need a lot of good mediators because we are talking about a holders involvement right through the project where they interact and work together with the team. Lots of discipline. We are talking about a lot of engineering practices like continuous integration, automated testing, and difficult to keep the interest of the customers toward the project. So I mean, since probably if customers in the traditional way, they are only probably involved in the beginning and in the end of the project, so it's difficult to keep them interested in the due course of the project. And there are different stakeholders who are involved, which makes it a little complex also. So we have seen what is all about CMMI and Agile. So generally there is a misconception that probably because CMMI has been implemented mostly for organizations which have been following the traditional waterfall model, which has been sort of, it has its own characteristics, which is not actually, which goes by clearly defined requirements, and which is actually change averse. Where in the case of Agile, so which is actually a sort of a welcoming change approach. So traditionally people are misconstrue that the CMMI processes or procedures are not applicable or may not suitable or would not supplement the Agile concepts or principles or practices. So which we'll probably look at whether this is the case in the slides from now. So what I've tried to do here is that I've taken each process area applicable for the development discipline and trying to map each process area in terms of the specific practices, and then see whether there are mapping Agile practices which are available in the Agile world. So, and I'm trying to probably qualify with a coverage statement whether it is something is completely available or something is not available or something which is partially available. So this is the mechanism that I'm trying to do here in terms of mapping the process areas with the Agile concepts. So the first process area is on requirements management. So requirements management talks about how do you manage requirements, or how do you obtain commitments to from the team members, from the project team, how do you manage change requests, how do you ensure traceability, how to align work with the requirements. So all these, probably I've mentioned the Agile practices. So we have something called as product backlog. So we do a release planning and a sprint planning exercise where we identify what are all the user stories which we would be developing for that particular sprint. Changes are managed through product backlog and sprint planning. So a little note on user story. User story is nothing but technique wherein the requirements are managed or developed in the form of user stories in the Agile in the Scrum methodology. User story, so probably if you look at a typical user story document, so it contains simple phrases like, as an end user, I would want to do something so that I can achieve something. So all the user stories I mean follow this particular standard, and probably and they are supplemented with something called as the user story narratives, and narratives are additional information. So if you look at these three statements, right, I would like to repeat it again. So as a end user, or as a end user or administrator or a particular user, I would want to, so I would want to implies what I would like to perform for a particular functionality, and so that I would achieve something or some objective from the business perspective. So this is the typical format of a user story, and user stories are supplemented by narratives. Narratives are additional notes which actually contain acceptance criteria also, which is one of the important parts. So acceptance criteria serves as input to verify or validate whether a successful user story has been developed or not. And apart from that, there could be variations. It could be attached some other documentation which are relevant to the user story. It could contain screenshots and additional information. So if you look at this process area, so you can see that through these agile practices, by and large, the coverage is available in agile. Moving on to the project planning process area. Project planning talks about what are the, how do you do an estimation in for a project? How do you develop the project plan? Or what is the plan for data management? How do you identify risks? How do you identify the resources, their training needs, and how do you obtain a commitment to the plan? So again, we have something called as from an estimation perspective, we have something called as a planning poker game. So where team members are involved, and we develop something called as we identify something called as story points. So we attach story points for each of the user stories to arrive at the complexity. And then again, product backlog contains the entire list of items. So developing a plan. So again, we do the planning exercise through release planning or sprint planning. We identify risks. We are we do take care of risks, though we don't have an explicit probably a process which talks about risks. Stakeholders are involved. We get the buy-in from the team, agile teams, and stakeholders like product owners or customers are involved. We do the tracking in terms of the burn down charts, which I explained earlier. Obtaining a commitment to the plan, customer collaboration, again customer co-location. So we're talking about a scenario where the customers are sitting along with the team and they are part of the team. They ensure that the team understands the requirements or the user stories correctly. And the form of daily stand-up meetings also, we ensure that we get a commitment from the team members. Project monitoring and control process area. So how do you monitor the project, the commitments, or the risks? The data management. How are the progress reviewed, and what are the corrective actions that you take? So again, you can see that the agile practices which cater to these are the daily standard meetings. So we monitor. As I mentioned earlier, so the daily stand-up meetings, we talk about the roadblocks as well as the amount of work that has been completed by each individual since the last meeting. Project task board. So the daily stand-ups happen in a sort of a conference room or a war room where we have access to this task dashboard where all the team members have access to the progress that the sprint team members are making. Retrospectives, again, they are used for taking any corrective actions. And that sums up the monitoring and control process area. Configuration management practices, again, from a extreme programming perspective, it gives a greater emphasis on things like baselining of code, pair programming, and continuous integration, where continuous integration is made easier by tools like probably Hudson or Cruise Control, and if you talk about the Java world. So these things are available and made use of in terms of a agile world. And how do you establish integrity? Again, we have the tools which talk about these which are used for implementing continuous integration. Measurement and analysis. So this is more from how do you measure the progress, what are the metrics that you start using for the project? How do you measure the success, or how do you measure whether you are making improvements? So, and probably in a typical waterfall model, generally we talk about different metrics like defect density or variances like effort or schedule variance. And from Agile perspective, we talk about there are certain other metrics which probably are involved, something like number of story points completed per sprint, what is the percentage of user stories which have not been accepted by the product owner, or number of user stories that have been added or deleted during a sprint, number of user stories that have been pushed to a difference. So basically we are trying to gauge how stable the sprint is, or what are the different metrics which will enable us to see whether we are able to follow a sustainable or a uniform development. And provide measurement. If you look at the second goal, how do you provide measurement results? So again, we do the tracking or reporting in terms of burn down charts. So burn down chart, as I covered earlier, it talks about the progress of the sprint, whether we are on track or whether we are doing items which are beyond the scope of what is required. PPQA, again, how do you evaluate adherence of performance process, and how do you track NCs, that is non-compliant issues. So in each Agile or Scrum, we have an Agile coach or the Scrum Master who takes care of the entire Scrum or XP process. So I've marked the coverage in Agile as partial, because though we have certain practices or processes which are involved, it doesn't cover clearly on what is the how to communicate the NC issues, and it's not effectively covered as part of Agile, or it's not recommended effectively in Agile. Supplier agreement management, again, it talks about how do you engage suppliers who provide different products or solutions. How do you establish a transition? What is the kind of support mechanism you have? So all these are from an organizational perspective. For in a traditional waterfall model, I mean, probably we can use, but from an Agile perspective, these are not explicitly covered. So that's why the rating says it's not covered. Requirements development process, again, how do you develop customer requirements? How do you elicit their requirements? How do you develop the product requirements? How do you analyze and validate the requirements? Again, you have, I think I covered about these in detail: user stories and story cards, and product backlog, through which we establish that the entire requirements for the product are available. How do you analysis at each sprint? So probably in terms of a sprint review meeting, we involve the product owner to review the sprint, the deliverable of that sprint, and get his inputs. Technical solution process area. This talks about what is the technical solution, what are the alternate solutions that have been considered, how the design has been performed, what are the interfacing mechanisms, whether there are any reusability aspects, and how do you develop the documentation for any support process. Again, so we have extreme programming, which gives a greater emphasis on refactoring, simple design, and collective code ownership, and usage of coding standards and pair programming. Which through these practices, we can ensure that technically the product is stable and it's of a good quality. Product integration process area. So how do you prepare for product integration? What is the strategy that would be used? What are the interfacing mechanism, or what is the compatibility? How do you manage them? I mean, how do you assemble the product components and things like that? So again, so it's more of a integration mechanism. So I mean, from Agile perspective, I mean, though clearly we are not talking about anything like an interface. So interfaces actually they are not separately called out. So interface, I mean, interfaces would be typically part of the project requirements or the developments that are being developed. Verification, the next two process areas deal with verification and validation. So verification, probably just a note on what is the difference. I mean, verification answers, are we building the right system right? And validation answers, are we building the right system? So basically it's from a intent and the user perspective it is done. Verification is helps to determine whether the software is of high quality, but it will not ensure whether it is useful for the end user. whereas the validation ensures that whatever is being developed is usable by the end user. So typically this is the difference between these two process, these two verification and validation. So some of the practices which I think I covered earlier also. So automated testing. So we are talking about a automated testing and which is happening on a regular basis. So as part of the continuous integration, automated test suites are also deployed so that the any code check-in is also tested periodically. Validation, again, the customer is since he is co-located along with the team, so he has a chance to see the product, and as part of the sprint review meeting, he is understand the product, he gets to see the product. Organizational, there are if you look at the process areas, there are some of the process areas which are applicable, or the focus is more towards the organization. So one such is the organizational process focus area. So it basically deals with how do you identify the strength and weakness of improvement activities for the organizational process available in the organization. I mean, how do you plan and implement those improvements, and whether you have organizational assets, process assets are available, deployed, what are the experiences, what are the mechanism in which the project teams contribute to the process assets. So as I mentioned, so this is from an organizational perspective. So Agile doesn't talk about any of this process area because the focus of Agile is totally different. Again, organizational process definition, again it talks about how do you maintain the process assets of the organization, how do you contribute, what is the repository, whether the repository is available, what are the guidelines and structure for operation of the teams. Again, this is not covered as part of Agile. Organizational training, so again it is all pervasive against the organization. So what are the training methodologies, what is the training plan? It includes both the strategic as well as the tactical training plans which is required for the organization. So I have marked this as, marked the coverage as partial here because though organizational training is not probably covered explicitly in Agile, there is a focus on training the Agile team or the project team. So I've marked it as partial. Integrated project management, so how do you establish the projects or the project defined process? How do you use the organizational process for your project? How do you integrate the different plans? And how do you coordinate and collaborate with the relevant stakeholders? So again, so I mean the XP in XP we have the coach and the Scrum Master who are responsible for ensuring all the processes that have been decided to be followed are followed. And I mean the collaboration with the stakeholders, as I mentioned, they are co-located and committed to ensuring that the sprint is successful. So they are part of the team. Risk management, again, so Agile generally, though it doesn't explicitly talk about any specific technique for risk management, generally the teams are risk aware, they understand risk and they prepare for it and they try to mitigate it. And generally from a Agile perspective, the risk items, because we have a blessing from the customer who is part of the team, who works with the team, so generally with respect to the requirements and the customer perspective are lesser. There is a risk items are lesser. Though I mean it covers risk management in this perspective, it does not probably wholesome as to what CMMI expects. Like a CMMI probably in a traditional way methodology, what you follow is something like you create a risk management worksheet where you track on exposure index, that is on the impact and the probability of the risk items. But here it doesn't explicitly talk about the techniques and how do you evaluate the risk. Decision analysis and resolution. So again, so how do you do a decision analysis and resolution? So decision analysis could be applicable in different areas and different perspectives. It could be from a requirement perspective, it could be from a design perspective. So CMMI process area talks elaborately on how do you establish guidelines, what are the evaluation criteria, how do you identify and select the alternate solutions, how do you evaluate them, and how do you ensure that that is successful or better. I mean, how do you compare these alternative solutions? So it's more of an elaborate coverage, but again, Agile doesn't explicitly talk about this, or how do you do what is the technique for this. But I mean, by and large, decision analysis, I mean, as part of the normal project teams, it is done on almost on a daily basis, right from the managers or the team. So probably we can say that, though I mentioned it is not covered, I mean, teams are doing I mean, DAR on a daily basis, but though effectively it is not documented. Quantitative project management, again, this talks about what is how do you compose a defined process, what are the sub-process and attributes, how do you measure, what are the analytical techniques that you use, I mean, how do you perform root cause analysis. So a slight note on sub-process. So what is a sub-process? So probably, if you probably, to put it simple, if you talk about coding as a process, so sub-process could be the code review or unit testing. So for each process you can identify sub-process and then ensure that you I mean, how do you identify the sub-process, how do you ensure, how do you manage, and how do you control the sub-process. So basically sub-process, once you ensure, I mean, they contribute to the success of the process to which it pertains to. So again, so from a quantitative project management perspective, we are not dealing with any specific practice in Agile. Again, organizational process performance, it talks about what are the baselines and models that you use, and I mean, what are the sub-processes that you select from organization sets of standards. Again, so you can see that again, this is from an organizational perspective. Again, Agile doesn't talk anything related to, doesn't have anything related to or relevance to from an organization per se. Causal analysis and resolution. So I mean, there's nothing but the root cause analysis. So CMMI talks about how do you identify the root causes for selected outcomes. If you note, it says it's outcomes. So I mean, outcome could be either positive or negative. So it could be a positive outcome or a negative outcome, which means there are some issues. So typically we do causal analysis only for issues, but right now with version 1.3 of CMMI, it talks about doing a CAR for even positive outcomes. So how do you, once you identify, how do you address the action proposals, and how do you measure the effectiveness of the action that has been performed? So again, I've marked it as partial because though we don't have a specific technique, we do sort of a causal analysis as part of the retrospectives meeting, and whereby action item owners are identified and who are responsible for carrying out these improvements in the subsequent sprints. Organizational performance management process area, again, it talks about how do you maintain business objectives, how do you use statistical and quantitative techniques to ensure the business objectives of the organization are met. How do you analyze the process performance data? How do you deploy improvements across all these areas using statistical methods? I mean, how do you measure the improvements on these process areas? Again, so this is not covered as part of Agile, since this deals with more from an organization perspective. So we have right now covered all the 22 process areas, mapping them against Agile. So apart from the specific goals, we have mapped all the specific goals and specific practices. This slide predominantly talks about what are the generic goals and generic practices. So we have typically three generic goals, and within that we have generic practices. So the first generic goal is on talks about the perform process. Basically, how do you what is the work necessary to satisfy the specific goals. The second goal, institutionalize a managed process. There's nothing talks about the managed process. There is processes that are planned and executed in accordance with the particular plan or a policy. So if you look at practices, it talks about how do you employ skilled people, and how do you involve the stakeholders, how do you get their commitment, how the processes are monitored, controlled and reviewed, and how they are evaluated to ensure that they are adhering to the process description. So we have different practices which covers all these. So probably I've mapped most of the uh, generic practices against agile practices, and which most of which I've already talked about. And the third generic goal is on the defined process. How do you institutionalize the defined process? The difference between what is a defined process? Defined process is a managed process, but where the process, certain processes from the organizational are tailored for a project specific need. And when I say tailoring again, the tailoring process itself adheres to the organizational training process. So, and the second is on how the projects contribute to the process related experience. So when you execute a project, what are the experiences, how do you contribute back to the organization processes? So these are all the processes that are covered as part of the defined process. So just to summarize on this common goal, so we have three common goals. One is, so the first one is common goal is on the performed process, second is on the managed process, and third is on the defined process. Okay, so I mean, summarizing all these process areas and mapping them against the agile techniques, we can see that by and large most of them have been covered, except for those which are talking about or covering about the organizational per se. So because we need to understand that agile is, the intent of agile is totally different. It's more on how do you develop requirements in a particular project or in teams. How do you ensure that teams work in an effective manner, or the project teams work in an effective manner to ensure that customer is delivered software in a periodic or a frequent cycle. So the intent is different in an agile perspective. So obviously it doesn't cater to any of the organizational focus on the process related improvements or process related uh, procedures. So to conclude, I would say that I mean, based on the previous slide also, you can see that most of the level 2 and level 3 process areas can be mapped with the agile practices, with probably a certain few adjustments that can be made in the way those have been followed. And there are certain areas where we need more focus in terms of the level 4 and level 5 process areas, so which we can call them as higher maturity areas. Typically the items like organizational performance, process definition, organizational process focus, organizational process management, and organizational process performance. And probably just to summarize and then conclude, we can say that definitely organizations can embrace both agile and CMMI together. So though only a subtle or rather there are some real differences which probably organizations need to focus on if they aim to be at a aim for a CMMI maturity level. Thanks. Uh, Mohini.
Well, thanks, Mr. Shri, for the insightful presentation. Let's quickly take up the questions now. You can read out the questions from the questions pane and the answers to them.
Yeah. The first question is from Chandan Kumar. Is it possible to have Scrum methodology gets implemented with team member of 3 to 4 people? I mean, typically Scrum, it's the recommended is 7 plus or minus 2. So it depends actually. So ideally it doesn't subscribe, but again, if the project or requirement is that, and probably if the organizational management decides to do it, you can very well do it. In the absence of Scrum Master, who is responsible to conduct sprint meeting? Again from Chandan Kumar. See, Scrum Master is a person who is definitely needed as part of any Scrum. So probably, again, as I told you, if probably you look at case where you want to modify this, probably a team member can do the role of a Scrum Master. But though I wouldn't advise so, or nobody Scrum doesn't advise us so. But again, so it's not like a who is responsible. Again, we are talking about an agile team where team members are self-organizing and self-directed. So it's not like a ritual that where somebody is asked to attend the meeting. So it's the team members voluntarily, willingly attend this meeting because they understand it's for their own benefit and for the success of the sprint. What is the difference between Agile and Agile Scrum and Kanban? Shankar Srinivasan, again there are different probably practices which are available. So probably Scrum I think we covered. Kanban is more from a manufacturing industry which was followed earlier, and there are some differences. Probably we can say that Kanban. I mean, it has lesser rules compared to Scrum or Agile, and we can use Kanban when we have more time to complete. Probably you can search in the net probably for more subtle differences on this. Can you please explain the role of coach in extreme programming? Again from Chandra Kumar. So again, Agile coach, again as I mentioned earlier, so he is responsible for ensuring that all the Agile practices are followed. So probably you can say there is some sort of similarity between the Agile coach and the Scrum Master. So he ensures that the process that have been prescribed to be followed for a particular project are followed. And the next question is, CMMI is about process and more implying on utmost documentation, whereas Agile is at least documentation. Is Agile acceptable under CMMI model? How do you overcome the constraint? That's a very good question. So again, probably if you look at this question is from Shankar Srinivasan again. So again, I do understand, or people realize that CMMI is nothing but documentation or overload of documentation, whereas Agile it's again it's sort of a sufficient documentation. So definitely CMMI, there are, if you look at the latest CMMI version 3, there are references to Agile. So probably definitely, if not now, definitely in future, probably the model itself could be probably refined to make it adaptable for Agile based projects also. But by and large, if you look at based on this coverage of the process areas, definitely most of the practices are being followed. So probably if at all the organization aim to take up certifications, probably they'll have to draw a line as to what levels they are really keen on. I mean, as I told you, level 3, level 2 and level 3 are definitely manageable, but for focusing on level 4 and 5, probably they'll really need to work on the improvements. How do you overcome the constraint of remote places Scrum team? Is the DSM effective in that case? Again, so this question is from Sonia Agrawal. Again, see, Agile, if you follow Agile recommendation, it says customer co-location, working in a conference room or a war room together, where Scrum Master, project team, product owner, everybody is available. But in today's scenario, probably this is not possible. So where teams are distributed, so there are probably changes which are evolving, like probably we can have the daily standard meetings through probably video conferencing facility if that facility is permits or is available in the organization, or through con calls. Again, so it depends. Doesn't it's a challenge, but again, so we'll have to live with it. How do you estimate projects in case we are following Agile? Again, this question is from Aman Sharma. So I talked about something called the planning poker game. So where we use estimation in the form of story points. Just a quick update on that. Story points is nothing but a random number which the team members assign against each of the user stories when they decide to talk about during the planning exercise. So based on that, they identify what is the relevant activities, and then they do the estimation based on that. In requirements gathering, what about testing? Because Agile, we start test planning very early. In requirements gathering, what about testing? Okay, I'm not, this question is from Surendra Narayan, but I'm not too clear. I think probably some of the words have got jumbled, or it's sort of incomplete. So probably just to, probably I guess Surendra is talking about how do you do testing in Agile. So probably I mentioned earlier, so automated testing is given a greater emphasis in Agile. So probably from a requirements perspective or validation perspective, since the product owner is part of the team, during the Scrum review meeting, all the deliverables of the particular sprint are showcased with the product owner, and then ensure that those are validated. You have discussed CMMI and Agile perspective in terms of software. What is your opinion regarding Agile deployment in other sectors beyond software industry? Is it feasible and doable? Please provide examples. Again, so it's a very good question. This question is from Shubha Valke. This focus area is more on from a software development perspective. I believe Agile is doable, because if you look at some of the Agile methodologies which have evolved, as I mentioned, Kanban or Lean, most of them have evolved from the manufacturing industries and different industries. So definitely Agile is possible in other industries also. So probably even if look at extreme programming, right? It started in Chrysler Corporation, so which is a automobile industry. What are the various metrics that are being implemented for an Agile project in CMMI certified organization? This question is from Vipul Gupta. As I mentioned, predominantly it talks about based on the metrics, based on user studies, how many have been added or deleted, how many have been moved to the next user study, what is the velocity of the sprint. Velocity is the number of story points that could be executed in a sprint, so that is what is called as velocity. So typically we track about, or we give more emphasis on metrics like these. In the context of project audit, what artifacts are required or checked for Agile practices? Again, a very good question, Shailesh. This is from Shailesh Jaiswal. Again, so when I talk about Agile, right? So I keep reiterating that it's a big mindset change. It's a social change where organizations have to really support or be ready for Agile. So when I say that, when a organization says it's ready for Agile, so probably there is a different mindset or a different thought process wherein the managers themselves will have to probably refine or fine tune their entire set of process, even those processes which are related to Agile. So probably they, from a process perspective, they'll have to modify as to what are the artifacts that are needed or that would be verified from Agile perspective. So only based on that audit would be making sense. Because from a typical waterfall model or a traditional development model, as part of the audit, the PCI or PCR, which we do, obviously we have evolved and matured in terms of what are the expectations from the project teams, but in terms of Agile, again it is left to the organizations to come up with their own set of guidelines and process from the audit or quality assurance perspective. Ideally, which one you suggest for a company which is mainly focused on quality, Agile or traditional SDLCs? This question is from Shrikant. Why? Again, I would like to make it clear that when you talk about Agile, we are not saying that quality is not given importance. Okay, so probably just to rephrase your question, so if you're focusing more on quality, so any method should be sufficient or applicable as long as you ensure that the quality product is delivered to the customer. Okay, so only thing is we are talking about when we talk about Agile, we are talking about a totally different approach in the way we develop software. Okay, so we are not talking about a case where we sacrifice on quality aspects. Okay. The next question is there a minimum maximum size defined for a project to follow Scrum? Bharat Reddy, again I think I covered on this, 7 plus or minus 2, that's the typical recommendation, but again, so it depends on your own specific process. Probably you will have to evolve, probably if you want to change this number, and then probably you'll have to ensure that you are consistent and successful. How can we adopt Agile in a fixed cost project? Again, so see, when you say fixed cost project, again it depends. So there are projects which run in the fixed bid mode. Again, so probably the main criterias are probably for the customer to be involved right from beginning till the end of the project. So it doesn't really matter whether it's a fixed price or a T&M based project. The only thing is, since you are mentioning it as fixed project, I assume that entire product backlog is very clear and clearly defined for you to start working on it. What is the advantage of Agile while comparing with Spiral? I think again some of the advantages I think I have covered already in the slides, so probably you can directly whatever I had covered. I think that's it I have as part of the questions here. Mohini, any more questions?
No, that is all, Mr. Shri. Thank you so much for your session. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for the support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgeek.com by evening. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Mohini. Thanks to all who joined.